Welcome to Elevated Practice, where we interview masters and mavericks within the field of holistic medicine and uncover unconventional stories in the field of health and wellness. I'm your host, Gretchen, and every episode I'll be interviewing clinicians, scholars, entrepreneurs, and educators who share their wisdom and ideas with you. Are you ready to elevate your practice? Let's begin today's episode. I'd like to extend a big thank you to Handcraft Health for sponsoring Elevated Practice and empowering integrative healthcare practitioners to create personalized healthcare packages for their patients. Create a free account today and elevate your practice at www.handcraft.health. And now, on to today's episode. Hello and welcome. I am so excited to be here today with Z'ev Rosenberg, who is part of the first generation of practitioners trained in traditional Chinese medicine in America. He has been in practice since 1983 and was president of the Acupuncture Association of Colorado from 1984 to 1988. And in this role, he helped to initiate acupuncture licensing laws in that state.
I left as soon as the law was passed.
He had done his job, and then he left to move on to greener pastures. He had a 23-year tenure as a professor and herbal medicine chair at Pacific College in San Diego. He has lectured widely around the United States and is published in all of the professional English language journals of the Chinese and East Asian medical profession.
Including the ones that are still there.
Any of them that you can find, he has published in them. Prior to practicing Chinese medicine, Z'ev was a shiatsu therapist and macrobiotic counselor in the early days of the natural foods movement. He continues practice in San Diego, practicing full-strength Chinese medicine, using herbal medicine, acupuncture, moxibustion, dietetics, and lifestyle recommendations with patients to treat a wide variety of serious health issues. Z'ev teaches as doctoral faculty at multiple Chinese medicine colleges, teaches CEUs, and special seminars. He has published 5 books, the most recent in March 2025, co-written with his colleague Steven Cowan, entitled A Ring Without End, Reflections on Classical Chinese Medicine, Mind-Body Mapping. So our discussion today will be navigating some of the content of that book, where Z'ev explores the dynamic processes of health and disease, rooted in ecological principles and cycles of nature and the cosmos. Welcome, Z'ev.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be on here today.
Well, you're already a legend yourself, Gretchen.
I'm trying to use this platform to get seasoned practitioners and scholars like yourself to be able to connect directly with people in our profession and our practitioners. So thank you.
I've enjoyed what I've heard so far, especially the one with Elizabeth. She was already on the map when I was in school around 1980. I mean, it was like the only reliable books on classical medicine were coming from her.
I so enjoyed meeting with Elizabeth and having her launch as my first interview. I was lucky enough to get to know her through my colleague and good friend, Dr. Jacques Moore-Marco, who's good friends with her. And I've known her now for a number of years.
I haven't seen him in a few years, but you send him a warm hello because I really enjoyed hanging out with him. Yeah.
You have had your career within this profession for over 40 years at this point. I'm seeing that you are still immersed in the classics. Your books revolve around these ideas and explaining, extrapolating upon them, understanding and musing on them. I wanted to ask you to just travel backwards for a few minutes to reflect on your origins within this medicine and share anything that you wanted to share about how you became connected with the classics to inspire you in your practice in the early years.
Well, my hero growing up when I was like a little boy was Leonardo da Vinci. I said, that's the career I want. I want to be a Renaissance man. I didn't know what that entailed exactly. And then later on when people would ask me, say, Gandalf the Wizard after reading Lord of the Rings when I was 11. So I always had an interest in more esoteric things. And I was very much into nature. I was already able to feel like everything is alive, like the trees have a breathing and inhalation, exhalation, and following the seasons. And so I don't know if sickly is the right word. Let's just say that I wasn't made for the New York climate and then the amount of pollution that was unregulated in those days. As soon as the weather's turned cold, I would get bronchitis that would last all the way till the spring. and I lost a lot of school time. So I got a lot of time to read a lot of books and think a lot, and nothing ever helped my colds. When I was a teenager, we would go into New York City and go to concerts to see like Cream, The Who, Hendrix, Traffic, all the great English bands. I ventured into a macrobiotic restaurant around the same time I read an interview with John Lennon, who was doing macrobiotics, and the time saying
Ah.
how great he felt. And another group that I was really into, which was like one of the early folk rock bands, incredible string band. They used to go to this restaurant in New York called the Paradox, which was based on a I-Ching hexagram. So when I was 15 years old, I went into the local public library and I saw a copy of the I-Ching there, the Wilhelm Baines version, and I took it home and never returned it. I just paid the fine on it, which is $3.50, because I couldn't stop reading it.
Oh.
And then one afternoon, I bought a new record by Pink Floyd. It was their first record. It's called Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And there was a track on it, and the lyrics went something like, "A movement is accomplished in 6 stages, and the 7th brings return. Thunder in the overcourse of heaven. Things can neither be created nor destroyed." And I said, I think I've heard that before somewhere. And the title of the song is Chapter 24. So I opened up my I-Ching, Chapter 24, Fu, the hexagram of return. And he
Oh my
took the
gosh, you were
lyrics right.
probably the only person who figured that out.
It was just by accident, really. And I said, wow, what a connection. This was the era, the 60s was the era of connections,
Yeah.
of putting things together, and Bob Dylan and so forth. Things were cross-fertilizing. Bob Dylan himself said that the 60s weren't about drugs, sex, and rock and roll necessarily. They were about, for the first time in America, cultural interpenetrations from the East, especially.
Mm.
So from that, I got enamored with my own personal journey to the East, so to speak. And going into a macrobiotic restaurant, eating the food, I said, I felt the chi in the food, even though I didn't know yet what chi was, 5 elements, 5 phases. And then I read a book by George Asawa, who was the founder of the macrobiotic movement around the turn of the 20th century, called Acupuncture and the Philosophy of the Far East. And he used to teach acupuncture along with Georges Soulier de Morant in Paris back in the 40s and 50s. And so I got interested in that, but didn't act on it yet until I took a smart move for my health and decided to move out west. And so I moved to,
Mm.
while I was in naturopathic school, I started getting all these messages. I was already doing macrobiotic counseling as shiatsu, as you mentioned. And people were telling me there was like a Qigong teacher in Denver who's still out there today. Kumar Francis, his name was. He said, Zev, you need to study in-depth Chinese medicine, not just macrobiotics. And then I got another message from this naturopathic school I was in, the Santa Fe School of Natural Medicine. The main teacher said, Zev, here's the Barefoot Doctor's Manual. This is what you should be studying. And then I invited a macrobiotic teacher to Santa Fe to lecture in the mid-70s named Sensei Noboru Morimoto. And he was the most common sense macrobiotic teacher, and he had some training in acupuncture and herbal medicine. He said, Zev, you have to study the Shanghan Lun if you want to really understand yin and yang. It was the first time I heard of the Shanghan Lun, 1975. And he gave me one of my first acupuncture treatments with gold needles on back shoe points. And so after that, of course, my interest was really piqued.
Yeah.
So I decided, okay, as soon as I get finished with naturopathic school, I'm going to go to acupuncture school. And there was one at the time. It was called the Kodatama Institute. And it was under, interestingly enough, a direct student of George Asawa named Sensei Masahiro Nakazono. And he took the yin-yang theory and expanded it. He would quote, the Nei Jing and so forth, and the Shanghan Lun. He wasn't an herbalist. He was really an acupuncturist, and he worked a lot with diet as well. But he had a philosophy called the Kodatama principle. And it was based on the 5 vowel sounds, that the 5 elements are really about the sound, that language was the key to understanding. I didn't really vibe with that so great, especially since he felt that materialistic civilization was the result of studying the Kabbalah, you know,
Oh.
and that this new principle was going to replace the Kabbalah and save the world kind of thing. So it was a little bit too messianic for me. But I still was willing to study with him. So I went to a class at his school, hoping I would be accepted as a student. And the class that day was he asked his students, he read a newspaper article where a Japanese scientist had found 4 types of blood tissue. He said, "This is very interesting, but what's wrong with this theory?" And they were all like shaking in their socks. I raised my hand. I said, "There should be 5 types of blood tissue. It's missing the I, E, O, U were like the physical dimensions. E was like a transcendent dimension, similar to ether in the Ayurvedic 5-element system."
Mhm.
And that was the answer he was looking for. I thought he said, "Oh, you'll make a great student. Thank you." Instead, he got really angry and started screaming at his students, stormed out of the dojo, and didn't come back for 2 weeks. And I got a rejection notice after that. So
Oh no!
I couldn't go to that school, although later on they decided they would accept me. But by then, another school opened up in Santa Fe as part of the Institute of Traditional Medicine. There was a naturopathic school. We had absorbed one school. There was an Ayurvedic school with Dr. Vasant Lad and a Chinese medicine school with Dr. Stuart Watts as the other
Ah,
teachers. And before that opened, we would meet in the back of a dojo in downtown Santa Fe. And it was very personal. It was a very small group of students. And one of my first professors was Ted Kapchuk. He would fly in and teach, and we became like very close friends. And so I had moved up to, after I graduated school, up to Boulder, Denver, and there was no licensing there. I had a license in New Mexico, but there was no license in Colorado. So there were 30 in the entire state of Colorado, more than half of who were physicians, like emergency room physicians who were just using it on the side. But chiropractors were allowed to practice and call themselves registered acupuncturists with 50 hours of training.
even
And there
back
were,
then it was happening.
no, it was much worse because they were puncturing lungs and kidneys and
Oh
stuff.
my god.
And I would get people coming in and say, "Well, he did this to me and that." And no. And so we decided to go lobby for a licensing law.
Yeah.
And we went to the chiropractic board, and the people who were the head of the chiropractor were old school chiropractors. And they said, "We agree with you. We don't want chiropractors doing acupuncture."
Mm.
Right away, they forbid them to advertise in the yellow pages and so forth. But we were underground. I didn't have a shingle on my door, but within a year, I had 100 patients a week just by
Wow.
word of mouth
Wow.
because there was such a demand for this medicine. I
Yeah.
had a full pharmacy, 3 treatment rooms, the works, you know. And I had midwives working with me, so I was doing a lot of obstetrics and
Oh wow.
births and things like that. And it was easy to get hospital rights in those days. I would go in and treat people in hospitals. It was a different time, the
Yeah.
early days. But
Yeah.
you had to learn, you had to like learn on your feet. It's like some of the early punk rock musicians who didn't know how to play their instruments and they learned how to play in front of audiences, you know. That's
Yeah.
what it felt like. But fortunately, I
Yeah.
had a very strong intuition, and the answers that I found for what I was looking for is not in like recipe books as much as whatever translations I could find of the classics, some of them pretty horrible, some of them much better. So the first reliable translation of a classic I found, other than Elizabeth Rochat de Valle's work, was Paul Unschold's Nei Jing, which, like I
Mhm.
said, was already my favorite classic. So I read it at least 25 times over and over, and then started collecting whatever I could, and then developed a relationship with Red Wing Books' Bob Felt, who hired his own translators, including our dear friend Sabina Wilms, who's
Mm.
still translating today. And
Ah. Y I love hearing this story where you found this medicine. It sounds like you had your experience with the I-Ching in synchronicity with Pink Floyd and and the philosophies of the medicine which were circling around your desire to understand health and the foods and the cosmos and the universe. You were still circling around all of these philosophies, and as you started to understand the medicine and start to study acupuncture, and I'm sure probably herbs and everything else, you still were grounded in this connection of the classics and the underlying philosophy from which it was all formed.
I had an interesting experience with a patient that rivals one of Ted Kapchuk's experiences as well, where you do the standard points. I had this woman, she would fly in from Dallas to see me, and I would treat her. And nothing would change. And then one day I had opened up one of the first translations of a um, acupuncture manual. There was the first book put out by Eastland Press called Comprehensive Acupuncture and Moxibustion. And I had used that as my textbook in school instead of the outline of acupuncture, whatever came from the mainland, because it was so oversimplified and so quote unquote westernized. But this one at least was true to a treatment manual. It was
Yeah.
actually in China. And one of the notes on one section said, all pain comes from the heart, from the Nei Jing.
Mm,
So the next time this woman flew in, I just treated kidney 6 and heart 5, and all the back pain went away.
wow.
Whoa, I need to really re-examine how I treat people.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was a major event, you know.
You know, where we are right now, 40 years later, after, when you first started out, we have so many texts available to us, and we also have so many overlapping areas of medicine. A lot of practitioners are now studying functional medicine and these other things that they're all adding into their treatments. And not to knock any of those, they have their place. I've studied those things too. But here you are saying, instead of looking at the myriad of options and trying to search for specific answers, what if the answer comes back to the simplicity that we've always known and really understanding it with some wisdom? I saw this reflected multiple times in your book that you just wrote of we're given a map, right? We're given information. And then how do we understand it and apply it to the living system? And that's what I hear you saying now too.
Medicine, or Chinese medicine specifically, is not technology in terms of the needles, the herbs, the qigong, the cups, the so forth. It's
Yeah.
the theory, the philosophy behind it. You could
Yeah.
do biomedically informed acupuncture, which many people do,
Yeah.
and I'm not a huge fan of it usually. And even herbal medicine, you can look at it in terms of physical qualities and constituents, et cetera, et cetera. But
Mhm.
that's not it either. But with
Yeah.
Chinese medicine, you could look at Western medications, supplements, anything that the person is doing in their life and put it in the context of Chinese medicine and have a complete, truly holistic understanding of what's going on with patients. And that's what I find missing in some of these other approaches, including functional medicine. Nothing wrong with functional medicine, but
Yeah.
if you use that kind of thinking,
Yeah.
you end up giving too many supplements and you have no idea how they combine together with each other or how to match them to the patient's unique constitution and so forth. We need to be able to classify all those substances in terms of warm, cold, floating, sinking, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and really understand what it's doing to their patients. And also, um, everything a person puts into their body is information. And the needles that we put on people is also information. And the body and the mind can only process a certain amount of it. Everything else becomes a waste product or useless or actually makes the person more sick.
Yeah. Now, have you found yourself ebbing and flowing, coming in and out of your connection with the classics, or has this been something that you always have felt very grounded within your practice within the Nanjing?
Well, it's an ongoing thing. I mean, as Sabina Wilms would say, it takes lifetimes to even think about mastering Chinese medicine. It's vast. In my opinion, it's much vaster than biomedicine, Western medicine, in terms of its application and understanding and so forth. And also, it's a medicine based on a philosophy of life.
Yeah.
Lao Tzu, Chuangzi, all those great. I remember Dr. Kim at Empress gave me my first copy of Chuangzi
Oh.
for me to read it. So, and we also used to, as I told you before, we did a class on the Golden Mirror, which was the Korean compilation of all the classical medicine. And the Korean medicine is always strongly connected to the classical approach.
Yes.
And what I've seen, having studied the history of Chinese medicine going all the way back, there's always been a connection to the classical medicine and also commentary in each generation and applications that were more unique of it. And that's our challenge today. Because the
Yeah.
principles of yin yang, wu xing, wu yan liu qi, et cetera, don't really change. Principles don't change. Western medical principles don't change. They may have new research and new tools and new technology, but it's still really based on a specific disease, what I call engineering model. The
Mm,
engineering model has really become predominant in modern medicine. And it's very useful, but very limited because it's mechanical.
yes.
It doesn't know how to individualize to human beings. And then there's a lot of people complain about this part of modern medicine because it misses the person. So, for example, I was having a discussion with Steven Cowan the last day or so about blood tests. And I'm going to read you a quote. The doctor stares at numbers and mistakes them for truth. HRV, glucose, blood pressure is treated as a standalone god with zero respect for the field that they sit on. Time, light, shift work, midnight screens, etc. Doctors change medications off a single reading without asking when it was taken because time trumps readings. Wellness apps crown a readiness score without subtracting the 24-hour wavelength underneath because we go
Mm,
through circadian cycles every 24 hours, along with, of course, lunar cycles, solar cycles,
yes.
seasonal cycles, etc. A 2025 HRV study already exposed that most of the stress swing is just the time of day. The graph is loyal to the clock, not your feelings, not your protocol. You can't quote unquote fix a circadian animal with tools that ignore circadian physics. If you don't control when, you don't have data. You have aesthetics pretending to be biology.
Ah,
That's from a circadian biology researcher, Young King Mito. They're trying to expand it and they're understanding that these numbers are constantly shifting. And if
yeah.
you base treatment on a static number, it's like a freeze frame rather
Yes.
than a movie, something that's ongoing. So
Yes.
that's what we have to be careful of when adopting Western modalities is that we don't buy the thought patterns behind it. As this person who's an engineer, by the way,
Mm,
no, this is trapped in time. It's
yeah.
not looking at the cyclic nature. I have journals of chronobiology going back 30, 40 years, Western ones, saying that if they've done studies where, chemotherapy given at one type of day, you can really reduce the dose as opposed to another time of day because of the body's uptake of the medication. So, not
Yes.
that I'm a huge fan of chemotherapy, but
And of course, I mean, this is the benefit of our medicine is that we are inherently aware of these cycles, whether it's seasonal, whether it's time of day and hourly, whether it's, the sun and the moon and, their relationship with our planet as it spins, so we have this to use. We have the knowledge of it, but how often do practitioners get to utilize those ideas within their practice? Or
right.
even call them to mind depending on
Well,
their education.
it's funny. Stephen just popped in a message on the screen here. Um, we've been discussing how the hexagram itself is a marker in time and how things evolve around. There's um, a chapter, I think it's like 31 in the Suwan, and it's all about chi hexagram theory, where each month has a particular hexagram and mutations and changes in time and how important that is. And what I've discovered slowly, gradually over these many years, even though I started with the I-Ching and Pink Floyd, that timing is the most important thing. And everything I treat now, it's not nearly as much disease oriented as it used to be. It's process oriented and time oriented. If you
Ah,
if you
yes.
fix the timing with acupuncture, moxibustion, the sets off what this one researcher Hong Kong called yuan qi. The body's own source qi is activated to heal itself.
Yes.
Corrective. And everything we add to it, whether it's herbs, supplements, forest bathing, they're
Mhm.
all ways of correcting the timing so
Yes.
that the body can restore itself to a normal phase
Yes.
progression.
And isn't this just when we talk about what is the foundational importance of sleep within the body, right? If you are not sleeping at the proper times, it's not just about how much sleep you get and if you're getting 6 hours or 8 hours or less, right? But are you in bed by 11? We have the clock, of course, and the organ clock, but is your circadian rhythm when your yin and yang are supposed to rise and fall? does that correlate with your sleep, and are you then healing your body through your own natural circadian rhythm, right? And
Yes,
this is the
it's
root of
very
our medicine.
root of our medicine, and I would say at least 50% of my patients have sleep difficulties
Yeah,
of one sort or another. It's become an epidemic in the culture because of the screens and the
yeah,
noise and they did a study on high school students, teenagers, that cognitively they didn't really switch on till 10, 11 a.m. And to try to drag them out of bed at 6, 7 in the morning, and it's like dragging your kids out of bed to go to school, and they're not functioning the first 2 hours, and they haven't
yeah,
had a chance to wake up to the day, to move
yeah,
around, to get decent food in them. And then people get ADHD, quote unquote, a new disease where they can't focus on anything because there's too many inputs coming in all at once. I mean,
yeah,
it's all about timing.
yeah.
And Nei Jing is all about timing, and reading the pulse is all about timing. It's been my focus in my writing as well, teaching a vessel diagnosis, as Paul Uncher calls it, pulse seminar based on the Nei Jing here in San Diego. I had to wait a few years because the book came out during COVID, so I couldn't teach it live. So I'm finally getting around to that. And pulses are all about timing. Michael Brofman did a Nei Jing pulse thing a few years ago. I felt I'm too old to do it, but Steve Cowan took part in it, where you read pulses of participants over a 24-hour period every hour to read the changes in the pulses. I'm not up for that personally, but I do find with patients, if I see them at different kinds of day, that there's definitely a time of day aspect to the pulse. As the
Yeah.
sun rises and reaches its apex and comes down, and then how it lengthens and shortens with the seasons, has a very profound effect on
And
seasonal affective disorder.
let's pause for a moment to extend a big thank you to our sponsor, Handcraft Health. I prescribe a lot of herbal medicine in my practice, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend the overhead keeping hundreds of herbs and supplements on hand. Since the pandemic, I do a lot of telehealth consults and ship patients their prescriptions. Handcraft Health has been my lifesaver. It allows me to have a successful and streamlined practice and saves me money and office space. I am not tech savvy, but the platform is really straightforward for me to write and easy for my patients to pay online and receive their orders at home. It's free for practitioners to open a Handcraft Health account. It's just handcraft.health and only takes a few minutes to sign up. It's one of the easiest choices you'll make to do what you do best. And now, back to our episode.
And, practically speaking, when we think about treating patients, is someone able to do that as a practitioner? You can look at the seasons, but can you be in your office at certain times of day? Are you interested in doing that to treat a person first thing in the morning or in the evening, depending on whatever organ systems you're treating and what your diagnosis is? These are practical considerations, but if we want to use best practices based on the roots of our medicine, should we be considering this? And have you been able to practically do that in your
Well, Michael
practice?
Brofman, when I first met him back in the 70s, he would literally go to people's houses and treat them at 2 a.m. to get the horary points.
Oh my gosh.
The thing is, of course, you could treat the opposite time of day on a different point that has the same effect at
Yeah.
2 p.m. But
Yeah.
he was very literal in those days.
Wow.
No, I just go according to, I can only really see people 4 or 5 hours a day
Yeah.
because I want to have time for writing and study and qigong
Yeah.
and all the rest of it. When you reach 60 years old, you have to spend at least as much time on self-care as taking care of others so you can keep going. And you can do it. You
Hmm.
know, you can definitely care for yourself and care for others and family members and so forth, but you can't sacrifice yourself in any way. Otherwise, you become exhausted and lose your
Yeah,
own yuan qi, source qi. That's
exactly.
the key to longevity in this field. A lot of people burn out after a few years, as you know,
Yeah, they're
right?
giving too much. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. As we talk about the circadian rhythms of the human and the cycles of the cosmos and the planet and all of that, I want to talk a little bit about the structure of this book that you and Stephen have written. Because as I was reading it, and I'm only about a quarter of the way through because I'm taking my time reading this. You and Stephen have conversations within the book. Some of the conversations, some of the chapters are a back and forth conversation. Some of the chapters are just Stephen or just
right,
you.
right.
And the topics tend to cycle in a circular manner with the topic sort of expanding and explaining and then drawing you back into a new nuance of the topic that maybe wasn't mentioned previously, and I'm enamored with the way in which you guys are discussing the material of the book in a way that to me, not only visually, because you have photos in this book and you have mandalas and you have a lot of visual components within the writings of the book, but actually the energetic feeling of what you're saying and how you've structured the book also feels to me like a pulsation and like a
You got it.
cyclical.
Wow, that's great.
It's beautiful.
I mean, not everyone I think could get it like you've gotten it, but this is exactly what we were aiming for. And some of it wasn't even a conscious decision. We're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
This is just, this is how we roll, so to speak, Stephen and I.
Yeah.
It's a tea house in his backyard, upstate New York, where the book was first conceived. And over tea in a huge garden, you know, in the springtime in upstate New York. It's very green there, very different than San Diego, where I am.
Yeah.
But then we did walks here, walking for miles on Torrey Pines Beach and so forth. So going out in nature, and as Daniel, our dear editor who wrote a chapter for the book, puts it, you know, take this book out into a forest, take it into a beautiful natural area, you'll understand
Yeah.
it even more. When I would teach pulse diagnosis at Pacific College, I tell the students, go out on a bluff overlooking the ocean and watch the sets of waves roll in. And you can learn
Oh,
from that how to feel the pulses, because it's the same in a human being. Our
yeah.
blood is pulsing, our chi is pulsing through, you know.
Yes.
And that's how we could tell where there are irregularities and functional problems and so forth. It's the ultimate functional medicine, really, in that sense,
Yes.
right? But I'm really, really pleased and amazed in the sense that you picked up on that dialogue sense, you know, because really we're trying to unpack and uncover and put it into the understanding that we all can appreciate, not quote unquote westernizing it.
Yeah.
You know, there is a famous, he's still around, a French philosopher named Francois Julian, and he said that he studied the Chinese classics, Zhuangzi, Lao Tzu, Confucius, so forth, not to become Chinese, but to get out of the whole Aristotelian, Newtonian, Spinozian focus of Greek Western philosophy, which is still the undercurrent of how the West thinks. Nothing wrong with it,
Yeah.
mind you.
Yeah.
But that by going to a completely different cultural view of the world and the
Yeah.
universe, it allowed him to have a perspective on life that he wasn't able to capture from within the philosophical foundations. And don't, no, no scientist can say that philosophy doesn't count or anything. They're all living out the philosophies of Spinoza, Wittgenstein, all the rest of the great Western philosophers. But it's a kind of a box in a way, and it colors all of us. And the hardest thing I tell people when studying Chinese medicine is you need to drop the Western perspective and try to fit everything into these little boxes, because
Yes.
that medicine is already passe in a sense. Even
Yes.
Western medicine is moving towards systems biology, circadian biology, and opening up into more systematic thinking, because they see that's the only way we can get things to work. And illness is becoming more and more complex as our culture becomes more and more complex.
Yes, for
You know,
sure, and, we see with Western medicine now adopting in some fashion this idea of functional medicine, and that function does function follow form, does form
yeah,
follow function, and is the most important part of the body what is circulating and moving and alive as opposed to these rigid if it's just an organ or if it's just a structure. And so Western medicine is starting to come around to this idea, but they don't know how to conceptualize it, and we do in our medicine.
I have
Already
a
have it.
funny, I have a funny memory from emperors, because when I came to California, they didn't accept my license, they didn't
Ah,
accept my schooling, nothing. I had to get a degree from a school in California at that point, which
mhm.
so I went to emperors because I had moved to Los Angeles to study in a particular Jewish community there as well. So I went there for 9 months, and then I got a degree there, and I got very close to Dr. Kim and Jacques.
Yeah,
But one of the teachers there was Deke Kendall. I don't know if you remember him. He's
I do
probably
not know.
he taught a physics class, and it was the physics of acupuncture points. And he actually wrote a book called The Tao of Chinese Medicine. And he self-taught himself Chinese, and he translated the Nei Jing, but he was an engineer before. And it came out totally as Western engineering. There's no such thing as qi. The channels are blood vessels, and the nodes are like, places along the circulatory system and so forth. I mean, I'm oversimplifying his view, but his neuroanatomy of each point was just unbelievable. Well, I took a 14-week course with him at Emperor's, but we agreed to have very strong disagreements in the years after that. But, he's remained a good friend all the way to the time he passed away. Certainly the data, you want to look at all these neurological connections and so forth, of course, very valuable stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not what we do. We're not
Yeah.
treating nerves. There's a great new book I can recommend, which is like a sister book to our book. I co-taught with the author Lan Lee, her name is, and she has a book
Okay.
called Body Maps.
Okay.
It came out around the same time. And she studied neuroscience, and she came to exactly the same conclusion, that nervous system is a black box. We don't even know everything about the central nervous system or brain. And that to try to map acupuncture channels onto neural pathways is a mistake.
Oh, wow.
You have to read it in that book, the way she puts it much more succinctly than I do. But
Oh,
I
wow.
felt that for years, but
Yeah.
it's something that's, as she says, acupuncture channels are both physical with the body and also beyond the body as well, because
Mm.
there are interface with the universe and
Yes.
all the different circadian changes, which is what we've been
Yes.
discussing. And that's the
It's
sense I think you're picking up in this book, is that
yeah.
things are moving and turning
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
sphere. It's a
Yes.
sphere, this book. It's not a linear item. That's why sometimes some topics will come back again, and then we take another perspective on the topic.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
oh, okay, here's another way of looking at
Yes.
it. Here's another way of looking at a channel, an underground
Yes.
river. Yes, and you can feel that underground river flowing inside of you and trickling down and up. And yeah,
Yes. Yes, and you're weaving together so many topics, sort of layering on top of one another to allow the reader to have these moments, these aha moments. You're making connections as the author, but then, as I was reading this book, I was thinking, "Oh my goodness, this thing that I never thought of in connection with what he's saying." And, you know, I have a
well, you
background
actually
in
have thought about it. You're just remembering it.
maybe you're
It's
bringing me back to ideas that I didn't realize were
you're putting
connected.
into words what you feel every day in clinic, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, I have to say, I have not been inspired by a book in so long. And,
Thank you so
I
much.
was actually like underlining and highlighting things, but, um,
Send me
and
pictures and
so
some of your highlights and outlines. They'll help me out, seriously. That's how I met Steve Cowan. He got a hold of my second book, Ripples in the Flow on Nanjing Pulse, and he covered his books with characters and comments and so forth. And I met him at a symposium here. Must have been 5, 6 years ago. And we just clicked like that. He said, "You
Oh my
get
god.
it, man." And he said, "You get it." And so we've been
Wow.
dialoguing ever since.
That's so cool.
And he's a Western doctor who left basically Western medicine, a huge pediatric practice, to
Yeah.
completely subsume himself into Chinese medicine and take
Yeah.
all that information and reinterpret it according to Chinese medicine.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
feel that feeling in the book too. He's very good with his physiology and so forth.
Yes, and some of the passages about physiology and some of the representations, you guys have pictures from Western medical history and Chinese medical history, and putting them in select areas to, I think, inspire the reader or to make a connection between these different lines of thought. And,
But one of the
I
rare things is like you don't see that many medical illustrations in Chinese medicine, but you do see like here, I have one on my wall here. Can you see this chart here?
yes, yes,
Charts like that and trying to interpret those. What were
yeah,
they saying? What was the message here?
yeah,
Um, they weren't obviously trying to create Vesalius like anatomical representations of the
right,
physical body. They were trying to understand flows and movements and changes and
yeah,
quality.
yeah,
So in the Nanjing, each chapter has a mandala of the chapter's information for visual learners. So we translated some of those out. Steve did most of that translation. And what you have are like visualization charts where you can look at that and get that full circadian sense of what it is
Yes.
you're going to do a treat. So
Yes. And that's one part. I mean, there's different ways to view this in different aspects, but one of the things that is so difficult in a typical textbook when you're using words to try to describe our medicine, because words are in of themselves, fixed on a page. And if you're just giving information or teaching someone a fact, you can put that on a page. But how do you teach someone about the ebb and flow and the change of functionality and something that is always in movement and never standing still, right? How do you do that? You can tell someone about it, but how are you actually making them understand that? And I feel like you guys kind of get at it in this book by actually taking the reader through a process that allows a reader to have the experience of it. And that's so
well,
cool.
in my first book, Returning to the Source, which was a collection of essays I wrote over several years, there's a chapter called the Picasso Principle. And in that chapter, I describe how a Chinese medicine practitioner looks at a patient from multiple perspectives. And that's why you have like those superimposed multidimensional faces and depictions that Picasso did. He was
Yeah.
trying not to get like a stamp on the person, a fixed frozen view, but one that was moving, undulating, and changing.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
impressionists like Monet were the same. Monet said, and Cezanne specifically, I'm not looking with my physical eye, I'm looking with my mind's eye. I'm painting
Ah.
what my mind sees.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we know now, and especially in Chinese medicine, the eyes are the brain. They're the same tissue as the brain. They're externalizations of the brain, and they take in light. Light, I've discovered, is one of the most important medicines of all.
Oh, yeah.
And that helps with our sleep and everything else. And exposing yourself to UV rays early morning, late evening. That's why Qigong is usually done and yogic practices at dawn if possible, and absorb some of that rising Taiyang early morning Qi where the fire comes out of the water. It's really all about light. People don't read books so much these days. They buy books and then they sit. Even myself, who's like a real bibliophile, I get distracted by the technology all the time. And I was a huge fan of Steve Jobs. I mean, he was like one of my heroes. He definitely did change the world. But when you change the world, you have to be careful what people are going to do with it.
Yeah.
So,
You never know how it's going to play out.
like Einstein figured out that lesson. Oppenheimer figured out that lesson. That
Yeah.
movie Oppenheimer, by the way, is all about what happens when beautiful discoveries become misused by powerful forces, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
And what was the quote as the bomb exploded? Now I have become death
right, right.
from Eastern philosophy.
He was fluent in Sanskrit.
Yes. This is also making me think of something else that struck me as I was reading through your text. You mentioned at the beginning when we started talking, wanting to be a Renaissance man. And in the book, you quote Leonardo da Vinci, you quote Gödel and Bohr, and you bring in all of these different topics of physics and poetry and nature and art. And as I think back in medical history, scientists and medical professionals in the past, not now, in the past, used to also be artists and
Yes.
astronomers and engineers. And so their understanding of the body and health was inspired and informed by the cosmos, by structure and physics. I mean, what are we missing when in our modern day we just have scientists in a very streamlined, narrow fashion becoming specialists? What connections within the human body are we missing?
That is a great question. We could probably take a few hours on that one. But I'll
Yeah.
start off with a book that I got, The Lectures of Sir William Osler. Sir William Osler was late 19th, early 20th century, I believe. And he was one of the first physicians to experiment with acupuncture. And he said that a physician, MD, has to have a liberal arts education, as they used to call it, the humanities, philosophy, et cetera, if they wanted to be a well-rounded doctor. And of
Yeah.
course, that makes perfect sense because you have to know humanity in order to help them rather than just be a technician. And I have also a
Yes.
chapter in my very first book on this topic, which is challenging our profession. Do you want to be a technician or a scholar physician? Right?
Ah,
Someone who just carries out the orders of an MD or a chiropractor or another Chinese medicine doctor. Do these points, like forgive me, in a fertility clinic, many fertility clinics. I'm all for fertility medicine. We know that Chinese medicine can be very helpful. But when you're under the direction of someone who has the standard fertility clinic model with the
yeah,
hormones, everything else, you're basically stuck with protocols. And it's
right,
hard to do your own differential diagnosis. Although I do know practitioners who, even within that setting, can do it. It's just a skill one has to learn how to take the philosophy or medicine into these locations. I'm not saying one
yeah,
shouldn't do it, just how one does it. That's all.
right.
Sir William Osler was also a view like in Chinese medicine, Japan, other Asian countries, Greece, the Arab countries, the great Arab physicians such as Ibn Sina. He was a great philosopher, Ibn Sina, right? Ibn Rushd, who was the teacher of Maimonides. Also, they were philosophers and they played music, well-rounded life.
Yes.
So he also, unfortunately, Sir William Osler said, a doctor should sacrifice when in training and not sleep and
Oh,
go all night with patients. Now, understandably, someone has to take care of those people in the hospital, sick people at nighttime. But a graveyard shift, I mean, the internships, the residencies that physicians have to do are
yeah.
health destructive.
Yes.
And it can actually, God forbid, shorten life. And a lot of doctors I know get sick from this particular thing. It's one reason I never
Yes.
went to medical school. I knew even when I'm in my 20s, I knew I couldn't take it.
The rigor, yeah, and what they put you through,
That's
yeah, and
really,
nurses, oh my god, what nurses have to go through, yeah,
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 my daughter has many friends who have gone through that, and I've treated them, and I see what it does to their bodies, and they're mothers with young children, and you
yeah,
know, they're spending all this time inside under fluorescent lighting with
yeah,
purified, pumped in air. It's not a healthy environment for medicine. And we have this kind of disconnection with nature built in to so many of our professions, computer professions, medical professions,
yes,
transportation, flying place to place, you name it. It's an illness of society that we
yes,
really have to deal with if we want to see things get better. And until we deal with those things, even we are only doing patchwork.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
try to spend enough time with people to make it clear that lifestyle, sleep, as you point out, dietetics are all very, very important.
yes,
America, I think we have an average like up to 3,000 food additives, and the FDA just deregulated more the additives going into food. There are herbicides that are known to cause neurological disorders or autoimmune disorders,
yeah,
cancers, made in Switzerland, one of them. Nowhere else in the world uses it except the United States.
Oh, great.
Paraquat, which California, by the way, just banned last year.
Oh,
And
good.
it's known to be connected with things like Parkinson's disease, illnesses like that, which
yeah,
they're exploding exponentially as a
yeah,
result of this. And so we have a lot of environmental work to do. So we describe what we do is ecological Chinese medicine. And I guess I'm going to have to add circadian Chinese medicine to the calling card as well.
yeah,
Because if you don't heal the earth, if you don't heal the environment,
yeah,
we can still really help people. We're going to be limited in getting these diseases under control. You know,
yeah. And the connection goes all the way through, right? You have the earth level, you have the human, you have the heavenly level, like, they all need to be aligned with our resonance, with, the way we are supposed to be functioning and to be aware of our rhythms and our biology and how that applies to the cosmos, and you are talking about this in in your book and talking about how our blood flowing through the rivers of our body and the ebb and flow and the energy of that. And how can we be aware of this when we're seeing our patients in the clinic, when we're dealing with our own life and our own health, and then all the way to the health of our society at large, which, as you're mentioning, is, I mean, not to mince words, really sick right now, not just in America, but globally as well.
We are
How do we
39th.
apply this?
We are 39th in the world in longevity and health in America.
Wow.
We fall way down, you know. So as one of my rabbi teachers said, we each take our shovel and start digging where we are. It's the small changes that change the world sometimes, not big.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
I have my little practice. I write my little books, and I have my shovel. You have your work that you do in Chicago. And hopefully we reach enough people to start to
Yeah.
create a wave of change. But as we see now, the ubiquity of social media, and I also think it can do the good things. Like for our profession, it's a great communication tool.
Yeah.
But you see what happens when anyone can have an opinion about anything and post it, and any conspiracy can just spread to millions and millions of people, and people actually
Yeah.
believe these things,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's another part of the problem. There's no easy answer because the complexity of what's going on right now is just mind-boggling. In the
Yes.
60s, we had Vietnam, and it was very clear morally that one should oppose this war because, like it says in Sun Tzu's Art of War, do not fight a war at a distance from your homeland because the people you are fighting, they know the land and they will always win. And if they cut off your supply lines, you're finished. So
Oh.
going to a faraway country, a place that no one has experienced, outside of the people who live there. They know
Yeah.
how to hide, dig trenches, hide in the forest, so forth. And they have simpler weapons, but those weapons are more effective because you're not acclimated to the climate. You're having to bring in supplies by plane and by train and so forth. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
you cut, you're finished.
Yeah.
So it's knowing the terrain that you're working on, right?
Yeah.
And we saw that also in World War II when Hitler, Yamach Shimon, decided to invade Russia. And they had millions of people that would just keep replenishing their troops. And it was the middle of winter,
Yeah.
going north into a vast continent. There's no way possibly to win a smaller contracted country like Germany in a more
Yeah.
temperate climate, going into a freezing subarctic region to try to conquer a country.
Yeah.
Mm, there's
Yeah.
no wisdom. So the Chinese even have wisdom and philosophy when it comes to the art of war.
Right.
And they say the ultimate victory is convincing your enemy that there's no need to be fighting.
Mm.
And that's also the basis of the martial arts, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. Start locally, start with yourself, start on a personal level, and then hopefully it will reverberate outward, I suppose.
that's what we have to do. That's what Lao Tzu also taught, right?
Wow. I mean, this has been so good to be able to speak with you about these topics and bring so much of this to light. I think that I've said this a few times now over some of the interviews that I've done, but as practitioners in the clinic and dealing with patients and always trying to educate ourselves and learn, it's easy to get bogged down in the minutiae or in the specifics of daily treatment and to be able to step back and say, why am I doing this? What is the root in which this medicine was first founded, first derived, and to really have an understanding and appreciation for that. And as I said, to be re-inspired by that.
It's a way of life. And
Yes.
living it, there was a great doctor at the turn of the 20th century named Zhang Chun, and he wrote one of the first books on what we call today integrative medicine, although his view is much closer to mine than what a lot of people consider integrative medicine today, which is I take the data of Western medicine and plug it into the classical Chinese framework, understand it through those eyes. And he
Yeah.
said that the purpose of acupuncture, moxibustion, and herbal medicine are teaching tools to teach the philosophy of the Nei Jing to our patients.
Mm.
Wow. Where they
Wow.
become self-aware, they feel their own qi, they become
Yeah.
aware, they're sensitive, they understand what symptoms mean, then they
Yeah.
understand the order of the day and the season in their own life. And
Yes.
then the self-healing process begins.
Yes. It's so brilliant. It's so simple yet so complex and brilliant at the same
So
time.
the applications are endless.
Yeah, endless, endless. Um, okay, as we're about to wrap up here, I always ask a question at the end just to kind of bring us back. Is there anything that you'd like to share? Something that maybe not even related to the medicine,
but just something you would like to share about yourself with our listeners.
As a colleague of mine who is a cognitive therapist, now retired, once said, I mean, it's difficult even for one who is as complex as you or I to understand our own selves, nonetheless communicate it to others. I'm a Gemini and a very complex human being, It's just trying to figure myself out and simplify every day to
Yeah.
where my greatest pleasures are walking in nature, eating simple food, knowing my times of rest and activity, and continuing to study and get closer to the essence of things. That's
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
it. I'm people, sometimes ask me, are you religious? I say, I'm observant. That's different than being religious. I
Mm.
follow Jewish law, and I also find the commonality with Chinese philosophy. I also follow the Tao of the I-Ching, Lao Tzu, or try to. These are paths that work together. Actually, Judaism is not an East is Western religion. It's often considered that way. We talk about Judeo-Christian, but you know, you could also say that Judaism has a lot in common with Islam and with Zoroastrianism and things like that. There are
Yes.
elements, and Hinduism,
Yes.
Brahma, Abraham, Avraham,
Yes.
commonalities to spiritual practice all around the world.
Yeah.
And we have to, that's why we must love and respect all paths, as long as they don't involve things like enslaving people, child sacrifice, and, because sometimes when religion becomes politicized,
Yeah.
it becomes its own worst enemy and
Of course. Yes.
mobilizes people to do things that are harmful. So,
Right. Right.
and normally I stay out of the political realm. I believe in medicine that we have to see the human and we have to see our commonality. We all have, most of us anyway, have 5 fingers on each hand and have a certain form that makes us human. And working in that form, that's universal.
Yeah.
And I think medicine has to be universal. So, and I've
Yes.
never found, my own way of life as an imposition to that at all. So,
I
but
love that. That's beautiful. Live in coherence with the Tao to the best of your abilities and view everyone in that same way.
I'm still a huge fan of rock music and,
I'm gonna after this, I'm gonna go listen to some Pink Floyd, I think. Um, well, for our listeners who want to know more about Z'ev Rosenberg, his book that we were just speaking about is A Ring Without End, and then your website, Z'ev, it's just your name, right? Z'evRosenberg.com?
yeah, without the apostrophe. Yeah. Yeah.
Without the apostrophe, yeah, Z'evRosenberg.com. And on that website, there are classes and seminars. There are the books listed. There is information about you and how to contact you. And you're very active on socials as well. So for our listeners, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow Z'ev there as well. So thank you
Well,
so much.
wonderful, and I hope to see you in person one of these days, Gretchen.
Maybe this upcoming fall at the next symposium. I've already got it in my calendar, so hopefully we'll make it
It'll
happen.
be a nice party, so, yeah.
Thank you so much. That's all for today's episode of Elevated Practice. I'd like to express my gratitude to our guests today and always for sharing their wisdom with all our listeners. I hope you were able to take away some insights, practical knowledge, or inspirational ideas that you can apply right away to elevate your own practice. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about Elevated Practice. If you have an idea for an episode or a recommendation for a guest, please respond in the comments or message me, Gretchen Badami, directly through social media. Thank you, and I can't wait for you to hear our next episode.